Was the final huddle ahead of Canada's $6 billion tariff hit on U.S. imports to avenge Donald Trump's surcharges on our steel and aluminum. Those kick in on Canada Day. In a rare move, finance ministers met in Ottawa today to discuss the problem, while the Trade Committee heard from those facing serious distress as a result of this trade spat. Here's Finance Minister Bill Morneau at today's closing news conference.
We recognize that faced with challenges in our trading environment, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder. We need to recognize that our opportunities together are much greater than when we're apart, and that was certainly an important part of our discussion today. We absolutely are going to stand behind Canadian businesses who are challenged by these tariffs. We're going to stand behind Canadians who are employed in the steel industry, but Canadians who are impacted by these tariffs. We will be talking more about that in the coming days. It is a critically important issue that we understand. Canadians want to see us supporting Canadian business, supporting Canadians, and I want you to know that you'll be hearing more about that shortly.
All right, let's get some provincial reactions, starting with Quebec Finance Minister Carlos Leitos. Minister Leitos, sounds like relief's on the way. Care to share what that's all about?
Well, I would start by saying that, of course, we didn't choose to do this. We are reacting to the U.S. actions. And friends don't do this to friends. The tariffs that were imposed unilaterally by the U.S. administration on Canadian products started out already before with the softwood lumber and newsprint, and now being extended to steel and aluminum. It's totally unjustified and unacceptable. And as the Prime Minister has pointed out several times, we can't just stand by and allow this to go on unchallenged.
Yeah, but you must feel pretty helpless, though, because it's going to happen. And I don't know if the ambassador shared any searing insights into this, but I mean, what did he tell you? Brace yourself?
Okay, it's going to happen, yes. Canada is going to respond in a measured way, and will continue in a coordinated effort. All Canadian players, meaning the industry, the federal government, the provincial governments, will continue to show a united front that two-way trade between Canada and the United States is a positive sum game.
Right.
It is not a zero-sum game, as apparently the U.S. administration thinks it is. We all stand to win and we all stand to lose if we put obstacles to trade. And in fact, the U.S. economy stands to lose significantly as well if they proceed with these kinds of measures. But it was about time as well that Canada showed that we are not going to be pushed around and that we can respond in kind. It's a measured response, but at the same time, it's a clear message to the U.S. administration that they cannot continue in this way.
But I'm sure the ambassador cautioned you that when our tariff retaliations kick in, the U.S. response is invariably going to be to do something even more, and that's usually, certainly the threat is that car parts are going to get hit with a 25% tariff. How worried are you that this is just going to keep ratcheting up?
Oh, certainly that's a big issue. That's a big uncertainty. We think at the end of the day, cooler heads will prevail. And I point out as well that it's not just Canada. It's the U.S. most closest allies. I mean, the European Union is into the same game as we are, as is Mexico. And we just find it, a little odd that the U.S. administration appears to put as much emphasis on dealing with the dictator in North Korea as it does with its closest allies in Europe and in Canada.
I mean, you're an economist by training. I'm curious what you think should be done about the fact that our corporate taxes are higher than the U.S. right now after Trump lowered them. Should we be in the business of racing to the bottom and keeping pace?
I don't think so. And in terms of corporate taxes, you have to look at the overall tax burden. And Canada did have a significant advantage on that. The recent change in U.S. The tax reform is going to change that a little bit. But Canada, I think, on a tax front, we are still relatively competitive. We have to make sure that we don't lose that competitiveness. There are other ways we can deal with this rather than just the tax rate. Mm-hmm. There are other things that governments can consider. But I think on the tax front, we also in the United States, a big portion of their tax reform package is temporary changes. I'm not quite sure how suddenly businesses will respond to a temporary tax change. That's what they said about income tax, was temporary.
We'll see. One thing that's been brought to the table, but I guess it wasn't part of the agenda today, was equalization. You've got 11.5 billion reasons why you probably want to keep the same system, and that's how many dollars you get out of it. But is there talk of changes, and is there a better way of doing this, helping have-not provinces?
Well, equalization is a federal program. It's a federal redistribution of federal revenue. It's not provinces sending money directly to other provinces. It's a federal revenue sharing. And all provinces contribute to federal revenues, including Quebec and all the other provinces. And then the federal government redistributes that money according to a formula that is more or less complex. That formula was discussed over the past few months, past few years. It is now, agreed that it's staying like this till 2024. Again, it's a federal program, so it's up to the federal government to decide if it's opportune to change it or not.
All right, Mr. Leitos, thanks for coming by. Appreciate this. All right.
Thank you.
Well, equalization might not have been a big item and concern for Quebec. It sure was for Saskatchewan. Let's bring in that province's finance minister. Donna Harpauer is the finance minister. She joins me in the studio. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you with us. I gather this didn't get a big hearing around the table, but it's too little, too late anyway. It's in the budget document that's already been passed, all the changes to the equalization.
It's never too little, too late in the minds of Saskatchewan people. We have pressures, of course, with the downturn of oil in the oil industry, as well as, there's been a decline in sales of potash, and our uranium's been struck. So on the resource revenues, we've been hit on 3 fronts, and it has had a serious impact for Saskatchewan people. The whole intent of the equalization program we totally support, which is to allow provinces across our country to deliver similar services to their citizens. We support that concept. However, it doesn't react when there is such a downturn as what we've experienced in the resource-dependent provinces. And, we spoke to it at the meeting. There was myself, there was the minister from Alberta, as well as Newfoundland and Labrador. We all experienced this downturn with no program to react to it. And so that is something we think that needs to be addressed. Our Premier, Mr. Moe, has put forward a proposal, and he sent this to the Prime Minister as well as all of the respective provinces. It's maybe not perfect, but we need to have the conversation.
All right. Well, you might have to wait 5 years, because it sounds like that's what they've locked it in for our next 5 years anyway, whether you were aware of it or not. I want to get your thoughts, though. You heard everything that went on today. You heard the U.S. ambassador, you heard the Bank of Canada governor. What did you hear, and what alarmed you, or did you come out of that meeting feeling any more confident this thing can be averted, this trade war?
It's very, very serious for Saskatchewan because we are trade exposed, as is all of Canada. So we're watching this very closely, and it's started with steel, and of course we're the home of Evraz, and so they trade a lot with the U.S. It's going to be interesting how it unfolds, and it's going to be concerning. One thing that we're looking forward to is Minister Murneau said that he will get a list to the provinces of what they're considering for retaliatory, because it's pretty difficult for us to assess the impact that we're going to have on our industries until we know that list of what the federal government's considering. We asked for consideration to be given for products that basically go across the border a number of times before it's a finished product. And steel is one of those, quite frankly, that crosses the border many, many times because it could be impacted even further if there is trade going back and forth before it's an end product.
What do you think the federal government should do in terms of helping out industries that are hit by this? I mean, what could realistically the government do? We
haven't had that discussion yet because we don't yet know the impact that we're going to have. It will be something, definitely, it was raised by Quebec, and I think there will be further discussion on that once we know the impact.
And what about NAFTA? Is there any talk about that in the meeting at all, or any sign that thing's got life still, or is it pretty much pushed aside by all this?
No, I think they think it still has life, but they think there will be a pause right now, and of course, we'll wait and see what happens with Mexico in their election. And of course, Mr. Trump wants to have bilateral instead, and I'm not sure what the federal government's position is on that, but I think that's something that he will push forward. I think an agreement, though, however, in some manner is going to have to be reached.
I don't want to sound too gloomy or pessimistic, but could this whole mess drive Canada to a recession, or is that too over the top?
You know, it's very concerning, and we met with a number of business leaders in both medium and large businesses, and they're absolutely concerned because they're looking for certainty, and this trade war is anything but. And one thing that's predictable about President Trump is he's not predictable, and so nobody knows where this is going to go.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. Minister Harpauer, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.